So tonight, Tim is going to take us further into the world of heat pump technology and related issues. And I can pass you over to Tim. Welcome.
Thanks, Robin. Very good. Thanks for that introduction. And thanks very much to Renew for organizing this. But this Zoom business, it's a bit strange, isn't it? I mean, it's sort of like the footy at the moment. Here I am performing to a big crowd, but where's the crowd noise? Doug, can we get some of that fake crowd noise happening maybe? So that'll motivate me. But chances are I'll get the same responses to my jokes that I always get. A lot of silence. Well, it's very good to be here. And tonight's presentation about space heating with heat pumps and getting your home off fossil gas is, as mentioned, the second of a two-part presentation on heat pumps. Part one was about hot water heat pumps, a presentation I delivered back at the University of Melbourne in November, and Renew has uploaded this presentation to their YouTube channel, and you can see the link down here. But about hot water, I have a couple of updates since that presentation. One is that the most recent version of Renew magazine, issue 151, Renew has published a hot water buyer's guide. So how good is that timing? So get this latest version of the Renew magazine and check out the hot water buyer's guide. And also over at my Facebook group, My Efficient Electric Home, I ran a poll asking which hot water heat pumps our members over there had purchased and were happy to recommend. So here's how that poll stood recently. We had 150 members with the Sandon heat pump, 30 with Reclaim, another 30 with the Stiebel Eltron, 20 with Medea, a dozen with Quantum, and so on. So I think that was probably the key outstanding question from the last presentation. People wanted to know what brand of hot water heat pump they should buy. So here you see what some people have and they're happy to recommend. And I have a third update for you. Again, in the most recent version of Renew magazine, issue 151, you'll find my article, Goodbye to Bass Strait Gas. And what's that about is that as the old Bass Strait fossil gas fields run down during winter 2025, obviously just a few years from now, or perhaps even earlier, the so-called southern states of Victoria, Tasmania, South Australia, New South Wales, and the ACT, so that's all of the eastern states except for Queensland, we have no idea where up to half of our gas is going to be coming from in 2025 if we continue to burn it at the pace we've always done. The gas industry, of course, has answers to the decline of Bass Strait. They see this as a supply opportunity. AGL wants to build a gas import terminal in Western Port Bay so that gas might arrive in Victoria by boat, having been shipped from Queensland or maybe even the Middle East. Competing with that, the pipeline company APA wants to expand their pipelines and bring even greater volumes of Queensland coal seam gas all the way to Victoria. No one is saying how much this gas will cost, of course, because it won't be cheap. But I've got another idea, as well will many of you watching this. How about we just stop burning fossil gas in our homes? And that's what tonight's presentation is all about. More than for cooking, more than for heating water, the biggest use of gas in most Victorian homes is for space heating. And yet one of the biggest money-saving things you can do in your home is to stop burning gas for space heating and rather to heat with a reverse cycle air conditioner. Since tonight is the second of two presentations, I'll not repeat a lot of the introductory comments I made in part one, other than to say a lot of what I'll present tonight is backed up by research I published out of the University of Melbourne. You can see some of the reports there. And here is some of more of the media coverage of that research published by Renew magazine. And then in order to further spread the word, I started this Facebook group, My Efficient Electric Home, now with over 15,000 members. Every single day, and especially during winter, we discuss heating our homes with heat pumps. New members are very welcome, so please, if you haven't done so already, join My Efficient Electric Home. And also through the years, I've probably met one-on-one with people in over 1,000 Victorian homes. And so starting this year, I now have a website myself, timforcey.com.au. So you can have a look at that if you want to see the methods and style I use to help people, and you can track me down via that website if you'd like some personal help improving your home. One disclaimer for tonight's presentation, most of what I'll say is information suitable for the fairly average homeowner or renter. people who are just starting out on their gas-free journey, perhaps people who have only recently heard about heating homes with reverse cycle air conditioners. So if you already are quite knowledgeable as a home energy enthusiast, and I'm sure many Renew members are, I hope you don't find this presentation too basic. But if you can hold on to question time, perhaps we'll get down into the nitty-gritty details. And another point on nomenclature, all night long I will be talking about reverse cycle air conditioners, and I will be talking about heat pumps for space heating. These are the same thing. So when I say heat pump, think reverse cycle air conditioner. And when I say reverse cycle air conditioner, please think heat pump. And so we don't want the question at the end of the presentation, is a reverse cycle air conditioner a heat pump? Because the answer is yes. I'm sorry it's so confusing, but it seems to be that mainland Australia is the only place in the world where space heating and cooling air source heat pumps are called reverse cycle air conditioners. You don't have to go any further away than New Zealand or even Tasmania to find that people there call them heat pumps. And they wouldn't even know what you're talking about if you called it a reverse cycle air conditioner. And then you might ask, hang on, isn't that a split system? Oh boy, you know, I'll try and decode all of these different words that we use for things by the end of the night. You know, I'm sure the gas industry, though, is pretty happy we're so confused about what we call these things. But for now, just remember, a space heating and space cooling air source heat pump is just a reverse cycle air conditioner. Here's an outline of what I'll cover. First, I'll mention more references that you can investigate after this presentation. Then I'll discuss why we would like to heat our homes with heat pumps, to save money, to have a healthier home, to lessen environmental impacts. And then I'll discuss how to do it, how to set up your home to be warm and comfy heating with an air conditioner. Starting with your home's thermal envelope, because that's critical, insulation, air tightness, and windows, but then I'll go on to the many different types of space heating heat pumps and the various ways to set them up in your home. And then I'll cycle back to some of the barriers that prevent people making the move to heat pumps and what can be done about breaking down those barriers. More references. Here's an excellent one, Beyond Zero Emissions Energy Freedom Home book written by Richard Keach. These, Eddie, were the first to show how we could fully electrify our homes and how we no longer needed to burn stuff in our homes, no more burning fossil fuels, no more burning wood. This book, published in 2015, is one resource that shows you how you can set your home up to have very little in the way of energy bills. No gas bill, obviously, and a very small electricity bill, if any. More recently, in 2018, Renew, which was then known as the ATA, or the Alternative Technology Association, they updated their economic analysis that showed people could save thousands of dollars by moving their homes completely off of gas and onto heat pumps and induction cooktops. Focusing on space heating, Renew has published 2 excellent space heating buyer's guides. The version with the dog version was published in Renew magazine issue 144 in 2018, but the cat version from 2016, that's still completely relevant as well. So to some extent, I'm going to assume folks can read these excellent Renew buyer's guides on space heating. They're an excellent complement to what I'll present. So those are some key references, and now let's get stuck into it. Why are we going to do this? Why would we like to heat our house with heat pumps? Here's one reason. You can save a lot of money. At our house, where I'm sitting right now, many times renovated, 100 years old, it's a weatherboard in Bayside, Melbourne, and we used to heat with ducted gas. Didn't everybody? But today, we heat with 2 reverse cycle air conditioners, individual split systems, one at either end of the house. We do this at a cost of only 1/3 of what we used to spend on the ducted gas. 1/3. This was an amazing, but not unexpected result, which I documented in this Renew magazine article, Comfortably Ahead, A Tale of 2 Heaters. So how is such dramatic money saving possible? In this presentation, I won't spend too much time describing the technical details of how the refrigerant cycle and heat pumps work, because I did that already. If you go back and check out part 1, which covered heat pumps for hot water heating. So I'll just cut in here. Here's a heat pump, an air con, in summer, using the refrigerant cycle to collect heat from inside this house and then to pump that heat outside the house. This is a great idea for summer cooling, should you need that, pumping heat out of the house. And then when we turn this same device around backwards using the reverse cycle, we see the same device now collecting heat from the thin air outside your house in winter, and then pumping that heat up to the temperature you need to be able to heat your house with it. So to make all this happen, you have to buy an air conditioner, and you have to buy some electricity to run the fans and the compressor inside the heat pump. But here are the big savings. Most of the heat that this aircon will bring into your house is free, renewable heat collected from the thin air outside your house, because our sun heats our air, even in winter, even when it's cold. There is heat in the air outside when it's 40 degrees on a hot summer day. Nobody's going to argue with that. But what people lose sight of is that there is still heat in our air, even when the temperature falls, say, to 5 degrees outside, or even 0 degrees, or even 10 below. With a properly designed heat pump, we can extract heat from the air outside our homes, even on a freezing cold morning, and use that free renewable heat to heat our house. And you know the best thing about free heat? It's free. The folks at Beyond Zero Emissions compared the effectiveness of a reverse cycle air conditioner versus ducted gas heating and illustrated this dramatic difference using this Sankey-style diagram, which is a little tricky to follow, so let me go slowly. First of all, on this side is the heat pump, the reverse cycle aircon. It is delivering 10 megajoules of useful heat to the living space, shown as the large green arrow there, 10 megajoules of useful heat delivered to your living space. To do that, we must buy some electricity to run the fans and compressor of the heat pump, as shown by the blue colored part of the diagram. But now look how small that blue part is. It's a small amount compared to the 10 megajoules of useful heat. To run this heat pump, we have to buy only 2.5 megajoules of electricity. So where did the other 7.5 megajoules of heat energy come from? They came from the air outside your house, free renewable heat that a heat pump can extract from the air and bring into your house. Buy 2.5, get 10, a ratio of 4:1. Not a bad deal. You won't find such a good deal anywhere else. Buy 1, get 4. This leveraging effect is known as the coefficient of performance of the heat pump, or COP. And in this example, a COP of 4.5 has been assumed for this modern reverse cycle air conditioner. Another way of looking at this is to say this whole space heating heat pump is overall about 400% efficient at collecting and delivering useful heat, using that overall ratio of 4:1. The copper-colored arrows up the top you can see indicate that there are some inefficiencies in this process. Nothing is perfect. Heat lost in the refrigerant piping, for example. But these losses and inefficiencies are small with an efficient, modern, not ducted reverse cycle air conditioner. Now let's look at ducted gas heating. In this side-by-side comparison, we are going to ask the ducted gas heating to deliver the exact same amount of heat that the heat pump did, 10 megajoules. But to do that, we will have to buy 13 times as much energy than we had to buy to run the heat pump. This is because ducted gas heating can't extract free heat from the air outside your house because it's not a heat pump. Rather, when you buy gas, and you have to buy quite a lot of it, the first thing you do with it is to set it on fire. So perhaps half of the energy you bought goes right up the chimney or the flue pipe of your gas heater. And then there are the other inefficiencies of ducted heating. So that perhaps only 1/3 of the gas heat energy you bought actually ends up in your lounge room. But wait, it gets worse. Ducted gas heating also uses a significant amount of electricity to run the air blower, to blow air around through the ducts. So the ducted gas heating system in this example has an overall efficiency of about 33% and can't match the amazing 400% efficiency of the reverse cycle aircon. So here we see a factor of 13 times difference in the effectiveness between ducted gas heating and a heat pump. But for my house, before I said our old ducted gas heating cost us 3 times as much to run as the air cons, not 13 times as much. So why is that? Well, generally, a unit of electrical energy, whether we measure that energy as megajoules or kilowatt hours, I mean, megajoules and kilowatt hours are just two different sets of units used to measure energy, sort of like we can quote distances using kilometers or miles. So a unit of electricity, whether we measure that as megajoules or kilowatt hours, can cost much more than a unit of gas energy. Why does electrical energy cost more than gas energy? Well, you could think of electricity as a manufactured thing, and it costs money to manufacture things. Where you could think of fossil gas as something that just comes up out of the ground, when what you were actually looking for was oil anyway. So that's a simple explanation, but let me go with it. So as I show here, this chart shows that gas might cost you about 2 cents per megajoule here. A unit of gas energy happens to be measured and sold using megajoules. 2 cents per megajoule converts mathematically to 7 cents per kilowatt hour, shown in the next column, which if that were electricity, that would be quite cheap, because electricity can range between 20, 30, 40 cents per kilowatt hour, depending where in Australia you are, and if your home is on a flat rate single tariff or on peak off-peak shoulder tariffs. Still, even if you are paying, say, 29 cents per kilowatt hour for electricity, that's about 4 times the cost of gas, a kilowatt hour of gas. So if you're using an air con that is 13 times more effective than a gas heater, you can easily afford to run it with an energy source, electricity, that costs 4 times as much as gas. So this example is very similar to the story at my home. If our new heat source, the heat pump, is 13 times more effective than our old gas heater, but the air con needs electricity, an energy source that costs 4 times as much as gas, we're still ahead by a factor of 3 in my case. If in my home we were still on ducted gas, we'd be paying 3 times as much to heat our house versus what we do today with the air cons. Now, another thing to note is that for many folks with solar photovoltaic or PV electricity on their roof, often they can sell their electricity out to the grid for only a price of, say, about 11 cents per kilowatt hour, which means in a solar PV home, electricity can be very cheap to use, not much more than the cost of gas energy. So in a home with excess solar PV electricity available, using your self-generated electricity in an efficient heat pump can make for some very cheap space heating. So will you see these savings in your home? When you stop burning gas and start using your reverse cycle aircon for heating? Every home is different. People pay different amounts for gas and electricity, and they might have gas heaters and air cons of varying effectiveness or efficiency. But in recent years, I've not yet been in a house where I've examined what they have, and I'm yet to conclude that gas heating was the more economic choice for hundreds of households that I've been visiting since I've been thinking about this. But I don't know, maybe you don't want to just take my word for it based on my experience. And maybe you don't want to take the word of Renew and their researchers and what they have to say. And, you know, we got thousands of members at the Facebook group who are doing this sort of thing and saving money. Maybe you don't want to pay any attention to them. So who else can we go to? Well, we've got the Victorian government. Here is the Victorian government's analysis, which is rather narrow. But nevertheless, in every case, the Victorian government shows that the cheapest way to heat your house is with a reverse cycle aircon. I'll read off one example from this website. Heating a small room with an efficient heat pump costs, in this example, $85 per year. And the Victorian government says that an efficient gas heater would cost you $140. So you're paying more, $140 instead of $85. But what if you had a less efficient gas heater? Then you'd be spending $170. So $170 versus $85. In that comparison, heating with a heat pump is half the cost of heating with gas. So well done to the Victorian government, who in some other ways tend to favor the gas industry, but nevertheless, even the Victorian government admits that the cheapest way to heat a Victorian home is with a heat pump. Who else is saying these sorts of crazy things? Well, AGL. You've heard of them, the company formerly known as the Australian Gaslight Company. They're letting their customers in on a secret that they would be better off getting their homes completely off gas. So even as AGL are coming up with plans to bring gas to Victoria by ship, they're telling their customers, don't buy it. AGL says, and I'll quote here, here's something that might surprise you. The cost of operating a modern reverse cycle air conditioner can be 1/3 the cost of heating with gas. So well done, AGL, coming to this realization and then not being afraid to tell the world about it. But the rest of the gas industry, still, they must try to compete with renewable energy and electrification. Otherwise, they're dead. Their business is over. So in ads from other parts of the gas industry, we see pictures of nice flames. And up here, there's a $1,000 bribe urging you to connect your home to gas for the next 30 years. But as much as parts of the gas industry like to spin it with bribes and flames, you don't hear the gas industry saying that gas can economically compete with heat pumps for space heating, because gas cannot compete. So you might ask, these big savings I'm talking about, that Renew is talking about, that the Victorian government and AGL are talking about, when did this happen? Is this something new? Well, the price of gas in Eastern Australia has certainly gone up in recent years, once those gas exports from Queensland started in 2015. And overall this year, in 2020, no less than 81% of the gas produced across Australia will be exported. So this big increase in gas prices we've seen in Eastern Australia since these exports started in 2015, this has been a big shock for gas users in industry, as well as for homeowners and renters. Contrasted that is now the falling price of electricity. Electricity is getting cheaper, especially if on our own rooftops we are generating it ourselves. But a big part of this game changer, gas versus air cons, is the incredibly improved efficiency of the air conditioners. Since this presentation is being recorded, later you can hit pause and you can come back to this slide, because it shows how the efficiency of air cons available on the Australian market has increased so much over the last 20 years. In 2005, for example, there were no air cons on the Australian market, none that were as efficient as the average one would be just 10 years later in 2015. In 2015, the average aircon purchased in that year used 40% less electricity than the average unit purchased 10 years before. So combining this efficiency improvement with rising gas prices, falling electricity prices, and the other advantages of heating with aircons that I'll discuss, it is impossible for gas to compete in space heating. And lest anyone be confused, I also want to point out the difference between heat pumps and resistive electric space heaters, these shown on the left. Some people refer to reverse cycle air cons as electric heating because we must buy electricity to operate the fans and compressors of the heat pump. But heat pumps really shouldn't be called electric heating because, as I explained, most of the heat that they produce is free renewable heat that they got from outside your house and just simply transfer that inside. That's not electric heat. Indeed, you could power an aircon with a direct drive petrol engine if you wanted to. No electricity required. So it's not electric heating. And the other problem with calling heat pumps electric heating is it confuses people. Heat pumps get confused with these resistive electric heaters shown on the left. All of these resistive electric heaters, they're all very similar in that every 1 unit of electrical energy you put into them, you can get 1 unit of heat coming out. Buy one, get one. Sounds good. You could even say it's 100% efficient, which sounds great. But until you think, well, wait a minute, hang on. I just said that heat pumps could be 400 or 500% efficient. So heat pumps will cost you much less to operate than resistive electric heaters. But still, I've been in homes where folks have been taught to be so afraid of the cost of running an aircon that in the same room, they will choose to run a resistive electric heater while they have an efficient reverse cycle sitting up on the wall. Crazy. We have sure done a great job of confusing people. So informing people with the right information is the key to saving money and having less impact on our electricity grid and less impact on our environment and climate. So that's what we're here doing tonight. So do you want to save money? Maybe you don't. Not everybody wants to save money. Maybe this possible savings won't be enough to get you to switch off gas. And you might think, gas is a clean green fuel, isn't it? I hear that all the time because the gas industry and all our governments say that it is. But they're wrong. This slide shows some farm and forest areas up in the coal seam gas region of Queensland before and then after the gas industry came to town. The slide on the right shows 150 gas well pads and all the interconnecting roads and other infrastructure, water, holding ponds and the like. If you use gas at home, you are on the gas grid, and this is part of that gas grid. That's 150 wells. But at least 40,000 wells are planned for Queensland. Can you imagine that? Can you mentally multiply this image at least 300 times? There are people living amongst all this industrial infrastructure. They try to, and they never had any intention of living amongst all this industrial infrastructure. They try to raise families and livestock and to farm and run businesses amidst all of this, or at least they did, because many people have left. They've been forced out by this invasive industry. Up in the coal seam gas fields, lots of things are chasing people out of their homes. One impact is the release of who knows what into the air. Here are some images of me with an ABC journalist and a cameraman, and I also had a $130,000 military-grade infrared camera capable of seeing the release of methane gas in the Queensland coal seam gas fields, a gas that is otherwise invisible to the naked eye, but the infrared camera shows it as these black fumes. The fossil gas industry says their product is clean without bothering to report or even bothering to measure these emissions of methane. Methane being a powerful greenhouse gas, many times more powerful than carbon dioxide. Over in the USA, where they have 2 million unconventional oil and gas wells, it's so bad that you can see methane hotspots from space with a satellite. At some stage, someone will analyze the data from methane satellites that have recently begun orbiting over Queensland. In California back in 2015, this incident, a blowout of a gas storage well, went on for 5 months until the gas finally ran out. This released so much greenhouse gas that it pretty much wiped out all of California's other positive climate change efforts that you might have heard of. So gas is a clean choice. I used to follow the research of all the deadly impacts of the oil and gas industry, fracking, but I got sick of it because every day now there's a news story out of the US as finally the science catches up a little bit with the industry and with what is going on over there. Here, though, I went back into the mess, and I picked out a couple recent articles for you. One from the end of May, one from the other day. If you live near a fracking well, what do we see here? We see birth defects in horses linked to fracking. And over here, we see millions of wells that are just going to keep releasing the methane even after the gas companies walked away. If you live near a fracking well over there, you wouldn't want to drink any of the water coming from anywhere around there, and you'd be concerned also about what's in your air. Here again, using methane sensing technology, we see thousands of gas leaks across the streets of Boston in the United States, but most major cities would be the same. If you walk down your street and smell gas, this is what's going on. Fossil gas being leaked all over the city. It's hardly a clean fuel. And I suppose the best thing about gas is it's invisible, because if you could see it, you wouldn't use it. But if I want to remind you that gas isn't a clean fuel, the gas industry will then say, well, neither is your electricity that you're going to need to run your heat pump. And they're right about that. Here is 15 years of electricity generation in Victoria, showing what comes from renewable energy sources, wind, solar, hydro, that's shown in the green, versus what comes from fossil fuels, coal and gas, shown in the black. And the gas industry is right. Although our electricity supplies get cleaner every day, we still have a long way to go. In 2019, only 22% of the electricity generated in Victoria came from renewables. But our electricity supplies are getting cleaner every day. And if you're thinking of updating your space heating system, you're making a decision that will be in effect in your home for perhaps the next 20 years. And in 2040, our electricity supplies will be much cleaner than they are today. But the other thing the gas industry wants us to ignore is what I showed you before. With a heat pump, we are talking about needing as little as 1/13 of the energy we would need if we were burning gas. They think we're going to need this much energy, this much electricity to heat our homes. They want you to ignore this factor of 13. Anyway, this is probably a good time to show this chart. It illustrates the Melbourne home of Richard Keach that he documented in the book, The Energy Freedom Home. Over 7 years, Richard completely eliminated gas in his home. That's the red color on the chart that disappears by 2012. And his electricity use, shown in blue, it didn't change that much as he made other improvements. And note, this chart doesn't even include the impact of Richard's 3 solar PV systems. If you included the solar PV impact, you'd find that Richard's house is close to being net zero energy, net zero emissions, net zero energy bills. If you are starting on your home improvement journey, this is a sort of amazing transformation you can achieve. Do try this at home. That's what I'll say about why you should use heat pumps for space heating. Now let's talk about how. But rather than jumping right into heat pumps, first let me talk about the thermal envelope of your home, because it's certainly worth investing in your home's thermal envelope. Draft proofing, insulation, moisture management, ventilation, and good interior window treatments can be the lowest hanging fruit when improving your home. There's good references about improving your home's thermal envelope. We've got the book and the website, Your Home, available from Renew. We've got everything published in Renew magazine and in Sanctuary magazine. These are all good references. Again, Energy Freedom Home from Beyond Zero Emissions, and the Facebook group, My Efficient Electric Home. Also blogs from people such as Jenny Edwards at Lighthouse Architecture and Science in Canberra. Here you see an article, Condensation Management, that Jenny wrote, and it was published in Renew. There are blogs and magazines and resources, and possibly even government websites that will be of use if these government websites aren't too biased toward fossil fuels or out of date. So there are plenty of places to go learn more about improving your home's thermal envelope. For completeness, I should also mention behaviors, although I don't often mention behaviors because I assume we are all educated adults here. But sure, you can save money on home heating bills by dressing appropriately and not running the house at temperatures higher than what you need to be comfortable. And there are also some interesting clothing and personal heating options out there you might not be aware of. So again, some of the references I already mentioned might lead you to some new ideas. Oh, okay, now let's get into the detail of heat pumps. With this slide, this map I created, I'll take us through the sources of renewable heat for the heat pumps. Air source, which I've already been talking about, or ground source. And then moving across the slide, once our refrigerant has picked up the heat from the environment, how will we move that into our house? We could use water to move the heat, and this is what's called a hydronic heating system. Or we could use small diameter copper refrigerant piping to take the heat into the house. Once inside the house, how will we transfer the heat to our living spaces? For hydronic systems, will we warm up a slab or will we use wall radiators? For the non-hydronic options, we have a lot of options. Will we transfer the heat from the refrigerant to the room and to its inhabitants using forced air? That's a common method, done with what folks refer to as a split system mounted high up on the wall. And I've marked that familiar path here in green, an air source heat pump with the refrigerant piping, bringing the heat into the house to a unit up on the wall. But there are many other options beyond just the standard wall-mounted aircon that we'll go through in detail. But a first decision is, how would you like your heat pump, air source or ground source? Do you want to collect renewable heat from the soil outside your house, or do you want to collect it from the air outside your house? To be blunt, in Australian climate zones, we want to collect our renewable heat from the air. Why? Because an air source heat pump will work just fine in Australian climate zones. They are often rated to perform down to -20 degrees Celsius, which is more than you're going to need. And this rather simple air source heat pump will be much cheaper to install and less complex and less risky than a ground source heat pump that gets heat from the soil outside your house. Ground source heat pumps can make sense in regions of the world where it gets very cold, but they're likely to be overkill for Australian homes and risky because sometimes it's difficult to ensure how heat will flow underground. Ground source heat pumps can be considered for larger commercial buildings in Australia, but I don't recommend them for your home. So the next decision is about space heating, heat pumps, hydronic heating or not. Hydronic means that the renewable heat we extracted from the air using the refrigerant is then transferred to water. And then heated water is used to transfer the heat to the house. So water is sort of a middleman in this process. Once the warm water is taken into the house, we might choose to use it to warm a slab or coils under the floor, or to heat metal wall radiators. So hydronic heating fueled by an air source heat pump, not by gas. Is this a good thing? Many people who have had the experience of suffering in substandard, cold Victorian homes have also experienced the extreme comfort of walking into a neighbor's hydronically heated home. And at that moment, they declare they shall have hydronic heating, whatever it costs. All they want to do is to be warm. So then that person will go home and they'll get a quote for installing hydronic heating, either for a new build or for a renovation, and they will be shocked by the price tag. And a heat pump powered hydronic system is going to be even more expensive to install than a gas-fired one. And you might be hard pressed at this moment to find a supplier who, well, sure, they know a lot about gas-fired hydronic systems, but they may not really understand what's involved with designing and supplying a heat pump hydronic system, one that is actually going to work. But don't be sad if you don't have the budget for heat pump hydronic, because when compared to the other options I'll describe, you probably don't even need or want hydronic heating in Victorian climate zones, in Australian climate zones. See, another problem with hydronic heating is that Australia is not Switzerland or Hokkaido or Saskatchewan. If your home has a reasonable thermal envelope and is a good thermal performer, hydronic will be overkill and in fact can be unresponsive. Take the Melbourne weather, for example. It's famous. One day it seems really windy and cold, and the next day or even later that same afternoon, the sun comes out. So if all morning your heat pump has been laboring to warm up your slab or your radiators, then suddenly the sun comes out. You have to open the windows to cool your house down. I know a fellow at Melbourne Uni, he built a high performance house and he wanted hydronic because he just wanted to be warm. So he spent $40,000 on hydronic heating, and today he hardly ever uses it because his home is so good it doesn't need it. In Renew magazine issue 149, Cameron Munro described a similar situation. He built a high-performing house. I went there on Sustainable House Day organized by Renew. Cameron Munro installed an in-slab heat pump hydronic heating and a reverse cycle air conditioner for summer cooling. To heat his house today, you guessed it, he uses his air conditioner. The money he spent on the hydronic heat pump and the in-slab heating system, he need not have spent. A lesson learned, which Cameron was happy to share with us all in Renew magazine issue 149. My own experience, I mentioned before our old weatherboard house in Bayside, Melbourne. It's far from perfect thermally. We have no underfloor insulation. I'm still digging in the sand. We still have some air leakage. We have some single glazed windows. And like most homes, we have far too much glass, full stop. Earlier, I mentioned how we heat our home with air cons for 1/3 of what it previously cost us to use the ducted gas heating. But what I haven't yet told you is how much money we actually do spend all year long on space heating and cooling with the air cons. We spend less than $200 per year for space heating and cooling. We're comfortable, and we don't need hydronic heating to be comfortable, even in an old, renovated, imperfect weatherboard. Another thing about hydronic heating is that you probably won't cool your house in summer with hydronic heating. What I'm saying is, like Cameron Munro, you are probably going to cool your house, as with climate change, our summers get hotter and longer and even more humid. You are going to want to knock out humidity and cool your house, and to do that, you're going to use a reverse cycle air conditioner. I mean, you might try to generate cool water with a hydronic heat pump. Some can do that, work in a bit of a reverse cycle. And you may want to try circulating that cool water through your slab or your radiators. But again, in Victorian climate zones, probably as soon as you get a bit of cooling happening by this rather slow method, the cool change will blow through and now you're freezing. So my point, I'll repeat again and again, is that the reverse cycle air conditioner is a perfect device for Australian homes, winter and summer. Simple as that. You don't need to spend big on hydronic. However, you might today already have hydronic heating and it's gas fueled, and you might want to explore converting that to heat pump powered so you can get your home off fossil gas. By all means, give that a try, as Peter Horman did, and as documented for us here in Renew magazine issue 148. This gas to heat pump conversion can be done, but it's not without its challenges. But if by now you also already have reverse cycle air cons in your home, why not try them for heating? at least on some days, or for part of the autumn, winter, or spring. I've published more about hydronic heating at My Efficient Electric Home, as have many of the members there, but now we must move on. Okay, we're getting close to zeroing in on some real options for heat pump space heating in the average Australian home. Let's say that you have an air source heat pump outside your house, or perhaps 2 or 3 or even 6 of them, as some houses do. And with the small diameter refrigerant piping, where you bring that heat into the house, so far so good. But now you are faced with a whole range of ways to transfer that heat from the refrigerant into your living spaces. How will you do that? Here are your choices. We have floor-mounted devices, or devices mounted up on the wall, or in bulkheads, or in ceiling cassettes. Here you don't see any air ducts, but if you want a ducted system, that's another option. Or you can mix and match combinations of these. 1 or 2 of these options you may not have seen before, so let me start with the less familiar ones. In fact, I had never even seen a Daikin Nexura myself out in the wild actually operating until Monday. I visited a client who had just installed their Nexura. What is it? It's a reverse cycle air conditioner. It can cool your house in summer, but it is also a heat pump that can heat your house in winter. It can heat your house in the familiar forced air way of blowing heated air across the room, but it can also act like a radiant hydronic panel and give you a radiant feel of heat that doesn't come from the forced air, but rather just radiates from this wall panel. How clever. I imagine Daikin created the Nexura in order to compete with hydronic panel heating. So if you have a Nexura, enjoy. Another option, this might look similar to a Nexura, but it's a Mitsubishi brand, doesn't matter, they all make these things. It's a floor standing or console model. It doesn't do the radiant thing that the Nexura does, but it can do all the other things. Cool your air, heat your air, filter your air. Just like this familiar mounted up on the wall air conditioner. You may have one already or several of these in your home. Their market penetration into Australian homes just keeps going up and up. Some people call these split systems, but I tend not to use this language because really all of these are split systems. Every single one, meaning that the thing that extracts the heat from your air is in one place outside your house, while the other part is split off. The bit that delivers the heat into your house is a separate piece of equipment. So if all these are split systems, well, what isn't a split system? Okay, this isn't a split system. This, you'll remember these. This is an air conditioner that can be installed in a window and removed seasonally or perhaps permanently mounted in a wall. The whole thing is just one piece. It's not split into the 2 parts. It can cool your room, and there are also reverse cycle units that can heat too. So that's a not split system. Whereas here we see the 2 parts of the so-called split system that must be connected by small diameter copper refrigerant piping as well as by electrical connections. Okay, back to the many options for air cons. We see the units that can be mounted in bulkheads or the cassette type that can be installed in your ceiling, along with the floor mounted, the wall mounted. Now these can be individual units, one outside unit connected to one inside unit. But if you don't want to or can't have a multiplicity of all these units in the house, there is the multi-head system. This is where you have one single outdoor unit, and this can be connected to multiple indoor units. So here we see this red outdoor unit, and it's got refrigerant piping heading off in 4 different directions. Multi-heads generally are more costly to buy and install than individual units. And that might seem a bit surprising because you think you're buying fewer pieces of equipment, but that's the way it is. Certainly installing this interconnecting piping can be more complex and expensive with multi-heads than just having a whole bunch of individual units. And also multi-heads will tend to be less efficient than individual units because of the way they are managed and controlled, and because there are longer lengths of refrigerant piping that will lose heat. But nevertheless, multi-heads can be quite effective and can be controlled room by room, just as if they were individual units. For example, I showed you the excellent performance of Richard Keach's house. He has multi-heads that are now a few years old. So are there even more options for air cons? Sure, there's ducted reverse cycle air conditioning. By the way, even this ducted reverse cycle air conditioner here is a split system in that you'll have an outdoor unit in one place, and it will be connected by refrigerant piping to an air handling unit, probably up in your roof space and less likely to be under your floor. The air handler in winter will blow out heated air that then goes into these ducts and then into your living spaces. But then importantly, and they usually forget to mention this, the air must get back to the return air inlet and back to the air handler so that it can be heated and cycled again and again. Folks need to realize that with ducted systems into bedrooms or bathrooms, you need to keep the door open so the air can get back to the return. Or if you don't want to open the door, then you have to have a big gap under the door. Or if you don't want a big gap under the door, you have to cut a vent into the door. Something. Otherwise, you've corrupted how the ducted system is meant to operate, and it will be much less effective and efficient. Why do people ask for ducted systems, even though they can be more expensive than the other options? Because it hides a lot of the equipment, and visual amenity and freeing up space in a home is important. Do I like ducted systems? Well, I mentioned the issue of the return air, and in this way, ducted aircon heating has some of the same shortcomings as ducted gas. We tend to have the ducts running up in a hot or cold roof space, depending on the season, or beneath the floor. In other words, the ducting is installed outside of your home's thermal envelope, so there will be energy lost out the walls of the ducting. You can buy poorly insulated ducts, or you can buy somewhat better insulated ducts. The better insulated, the better, of course, especially if the ducts are going to be outside the thermal envelope of the building. And also, you have to make sure the ducts are installed well in the first place and that they don't fall apart after a few years or get damaged by animals or children or tradespeople. I could show you plenty of photos of faulty ducts, smashed ducts, frayed ducts, eaten ducts, but I won't turn this into one of those everything is crap presentations. Another very significant inefficiency of ducted systems, or an advantage depending on your priorities, is again, like ducted gas, is that you're probably going to be heating more of the house than you actually need to with a ducted system. Even though modern ones can be zoned, you might be heating 8 rooms when the family is really only using 3 rooms, which is a big inefficiency. But if you want to be able to go from room to room and minimize any temperature extremes, a ducted system can give that for you, as can a not ducted system too. But with the unducted system, there is generally more control from room to room, and there's not the issue of that returning air again, which creates an inefficiency. So I caution people about using whole house ducted reverse cycle air cons. They can still be cheaper to operate than a ducted gas system, but their electricity use will be substantial, and you will not be heating and cooling your house for less than $200 per year, as my wife and I do at home. Now this slide shows how a household organized their heat pump heating and cooling. It has 2 multi-headed systems, so system 1 and system 2, and one of these even has connected to a bit of ducting. So the red boxes are the outside units, and the thin blue lines are the refrigerant piping. So system 2 is a multi-head servicing 3 rooms, 3 wall-mounted air cons, and these 2 are back-to-back in 2 different rooms. System 1 is a multi-headed unit also, and it services 1 wall-mounted unit, but then it also supplies heated and cooled refrigerant to a ducted system that services 2 other rooms. What isn't shown again is how the air must get back to the return here. You'd have to leave the doors open for that. I encourage all homes where there are heating system decisions to be made for a new build or for a renovation, you should have a sketch like this. I mean, often we see these home floor plans and they've got all the details right down to the laundry sink and the toilet seat. Where's the toilet seat on this one? Yeah, there's the toilet seat. But often these floor plan drawings are completely silent on the heating and cooling system. And I might add, they're also silent on how the hot water system is going to be configured. So I hope we can change that and in the future get key details shown on our floor plans and not ignored until, you know, the very last stage of the project. Oh my God, where are we going to put the air conditioners? That's the usual situation. Okay, if you're not yet sold on heating with reverse cycle air cons, I do want to enumerate just how amazing these machines are. The main point of this presentation has been that reverse cycle heat pumps can be the cheapest and cleanest way to heat your house. And of course, you also get summer cooling thrown into the deal. but you also get air filtering. And you can get quite sophisticated air deodorization and air treatment suitable for some asthma sufferers. And during the bushfires this summer, that was quite useful. Of course, you get a fan to move the air around inside. So I find we really don't need our ceiling fans anymore since we got our air conditioners. You can get humidity control, reducing humidity in the summer without making the air any cooler. So basically a dehumidifier. And in the case of the Daikin US7, you can add humidity in the winter if you want to avoid that dry heated air. It comes from every other heating system. You can also get Wi-Fi controls, timers, motion sensors. In the case of the Daikin US7, it has the ability to bring fresh filtered air into your home. It's not quite a full heat recovery ventilation system, but it gives you some options. And if you have solar PV and perhaps a battery, you can run all this off electricity that you have made yourself. Reverse cycle air cons, so much more than just a way to cheaply heat a house. I mentioned the air cons filter the air. Air cons filter the air. So that means they have filters. So that means you need to keep those filters clean. I would say the majority of the clients' homes that I visit, people did not even know there were filters in there that needed to be regularly cleaned by the home occupant. A bit of a vacuum and a wash, it's not difficult. But unless you do think that cleaning filters will be difficult, in that case, again, you can consider the Daikin US7 model because it even cleans its own filters. So what else is there to consider if you want to heat with a reverse cycle air con heat pump? How big should it be? This is a big question. You've got a renovation, or you've got a new build, or you've got an existing home and it's got a room in it. And so how big should the air con be? Well, there's an online calculator known as Fair Air, developed by the organization AIRAH, or ERA. So this tool can be used for some first pass sizing. But given that traditionally most Australians have bought air conditioners for cooling and not for heating, this tool, Fair Air, presently only does summer cooling calculations, not heating calculations. But I believe that ERA are working to improve that. Still, Fair Air is one guide, even though Fair Air does seem to say you will need a larger capacity unit than perhaps you really do. And this is because air con suppliers want you to be able to come home on a hot summer day when the house is heated up to a stifling degree and you want to cool that house down in 10 minutes. Well, the air con suppliers want you to be able to do that so that you will never ring them up and complain. Of course, they can also make a bit more money, possibly by selling you a larger unit rather than something smaller. This makes sense in a way, and if you do end up buying an air con that is far larger than you really need, this is not necessarily a bad thing, because it means you have invested in a larger heat exchanger, and this can mean the whole system works quite efficiently, because it seldom has to work very hard for what it's designed to do. This didn't used to be the case with the older air cons. They had difficulty turning down to lower operating rates. But this was before the advent of control enhancements and the inverter technology. So on top of efficiency, databases, talking about efficiency here, this is the database energyrating.gov.au. And if you want to find out the efficiency of air conditioners on the Australian market, the star ratings and other data, go to this database. But it's good to be aware that air cons rated up to 7 stars exist, because you wouldn't want to visit a supplier, a white goods supplier, and you see their top rated device is 4 stars, and you think, oh, that must be pretty good. It's the top one they have here. But you didn't actually realize there's a 7-star on the market, just not for sale in this particular outlet. So consider that. Every extra star means that the efficiency of the device is 10 or 15% better, and your operating costs will be 10 or 15% lower. So as I said, air cons right up to 7 stars exist. And it's interesting to compare these with those basic electric resistive heaters I mentioned before. Electric resistive heaters don't have star ratings because they're all basically the same in terms of heat effectiveness. But if they were to be compared with heat pumps, they'd rate about -5 stars. So be careful when using these sorts of electric heaters for hours and hours on end. Still on heat pump efficiency, it's true that heat pumps will be more efficient and they'll cost less to operate when it's not so cold outside, but they will cost more to operate when it's very cold outside. So the analogy is the water pump. If you're trying to pump water to the top of a small hill, that won't cost you so much. But if you need to pump water to the top of a very high hill, that's going to cost you more. So it's the same with heat pumps. They must work harder when it's colder outside. This chart from the internet shows that if it's 21 degrees C outside and you put 1 unit of electrical energy into this particular heat pump, it will produce 4 units of heat. That's that coefficient of performance of 4. But down at 0 degrees ambient temperature, this heat pump will only put out half as much heat for each unit of electrical energy it uses. So that's a COP of 2. I mentioned that space heating heat pumps can work right down to as low as minus 20 degrees, but down at those temperatures, the performance or the efficiency or the economics won't be that great, but still better than running a resistive electric space heater that always has a COP of just 1, and possibly better even than running a gas heater that has a COP of less than 1. But the flip side good news is, take right now here in Melbourne, it's about 11 degrees outside. Our heat pump is on, but it's not working very hard because it's not that cold outside. Heat pumps work really well in Australian climate zones year-round because most of the time it's really not that cold outside. Perhaps you know my accent, it's from North America. So I grew up with ice and snow. I know what cold is like. We ain't got it here. It's not like it's below freezing for 50 consecutive days like it might be in other parts of the world. However, it is possible under certain weather conditions for an aircon to ice up a bit on the outside unit. And then it needs to automatically go into defrost mode. Because the refrigerant at what point of its cycle is very cold, air being blown over the outside unit can leave some frost behind. This is perhaps surprisingly more likely to happen at an ambient temperature of around plus 3 degrees Celsius and relatively humid air conditions. And it's less likely to happen at minus 10 because the humidity in the air, which is what's going to become this frost, humidity drops quite rapidly as you get down to, say, minus 5 degrees. So you may see less icing when it is really cold, but more when it is just above freezing. So what can you do about icing? You allow the device to automatically go into defrost mode. And this chart over here on the side shows, this shows the morning heating up of a living space in Canberra with the aircon repeatedly going into defrost mode. This isn't ideal, but neither is it a tragedy. One strategy is to start the aircon earlier in the morning and to operate it at a more gentle pace, which might avoid some of these defrost events. Another consideration is where should you place your outdoor unit to make it less susceptible to frosting up. Get some professional advice on this one because every house and every local microclimate is different. Okay, what else is there to think about with heat pumps and refrigerant systems? There are the hazards associated with the refrigerant itself inside your heat pump. Will this vaporous refrigerant ever leak out to be released into our atmosphere? Will it impact the ozone layer? Is it a greenhouse gas? Is it flammable? Is it poisonous or an asphyxiation risk? I suppose my view is that I bought my heat pumps from reputable suppliers and installers. I am trusting them to tighten up the pipework and to protect the pipework from vibration so the refrigerant doesn't ever leak out. And when the day comes to dispose of my heat pumps, again, I will deal with a reputable company that is licensed to do the right thing and not release refrigerant into our atmosphere. That said, some refrigerants aren't as bad as others, and I show some of the data in this table, both for refrigerants that you might find in space heating or in water heating heat pumps. Some of these refrigerants look rather harmless, and others look damaging to the ozone layer or to the climate. So why don't we use the less damaging ones? Well, using them might increase flammability risk or mean the heat pump will be less efficient or that the heat pump will need a higher pressure rating and so will be more expensive to buy. This techno-economic selection of refrigerants is a big topic all to itself. I am aware there are changing regulations and a push to use less damaging refrigerants, but I don't find when folks are comparing all other aspects of heat pumps, such as the upfront cost, the efficiency, the noise, the warranties, etc., the refrigerant selection itself doesn't make it too far up the priority list for most people. A more obvious question people have about heat pumps is what brand should I buy? With so many options and considerations, it can be hard to answer that question. So to simplify it, I again asked our 15,000 members at My Efficient Electric Home what company made their air cons and would they recommend them? This slide shows the recent poll. Nearly 200 recommend Dakin, 100 or so for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, around 60 for Fujitsu. And I think Fujitsu does so well because of that cricketer there, Tubby Taylor's advertising. 45 voted for Mitsubishi Electric. And it's useful to realize that Mitsubishi Heavy Industries and Mitsubishi Electric are two different companies. And they've been so since about 1930, with Mitsubishi Heavy Industries being the more highly regarded for air conditioners, it seems. So keep that in mind. Another 45 people were happy with Panasonic, and then some smaller numbers for other air cons. So there you go. That's what people are out there doing. I'm getting close to the end now. So what are the barriers preventing more Australians from heating their homes with heat pumps? Unlike the situation with hot water heat pumps, where there are some significant barriers, and I covered that in the other presentation, but the barriers for using a reverse cycle aircon for heating can be quite low. In some cases, switching from heating with gas or resistive electric over to using a heat pump can be as simple as people picking up their aircon remote control and for the very first time finding the heat button and giving it a push. Way back in 2015, we calculated that Victorians could save $250 million per year simply by using the reverse cycle air conditioners that were already hanging on their walls, but they'd never use them for heating. There's nothing to buy here. Just find that remote control, find the right button, and push it. This has got to be the lowest hanging fruit around, and if governments actually wanted to assist people's budgets, they'd let them in on this secret. But in other cases, the barriers are high. We're still building new homes with that disastrous combination of ducted gas heating up through the floor and ducted evaporative cooling down from the roof space. Or sometimes these days, even the ducted gas heating is coming down from the roof space, and you'll hardly have any ceiling left at all. These homes will be up for a major refit someday, but it's tough for people to replace nearly brand new equipment. And if you want to further understand how you can expand your use of reverse cycle air conditioners in your home, I suggest you invite a reputable supplier or 2 or 3 to visit your home and discuss home heating options and installation costs. In conclusion, support Renew, become a member and reap the benefits. Make a donation. Times are tough in the not-for-profit sector these days. And also, if you or someone you know is on Facebook, have a look at My Efficient Electric Home and get your home off gas. Thank you. That's it.
Wow, brilliant, Tim. Thank you very much. Well, big thank yous at the end. Now we'll probably go to a Q&A session. Grab yourself a drink first. And hopefully Doug has been doing his magic behind. So I'll try and ask you these. Greg says, interested to know of any experience with heat pumps and underfloor heating systems for domestic housing.
Yeah, so the underfloor heating system, so that's the hydronic again. Yeah, I think we touched on that.
Okay. And Mal says, do you have any experience with Fontaldo? And it's just disappeared on me. Modular alloy hydronic panels made in Italy. I intend to use them in combination with a potable and hydronic system. Portable, I think that should be.
No, I don't have any experience with that. So, of course, you could get in contact with Renew, and there's certainly experts there, Lance Turner and others, that may be able to comment. And of course, we see questions like this every day at My Efficient Electric Home, some of which we can answer knowledgeably and some which we can't. But you could be the leader in this space and you'll educate all of us. And that is the thing about Australia. Like I said, I grew up overseas. And when I was growing up over there, you know, in the 1970s, we had energy crises. So we were wrapping water heaters with insulation and doing those things. And then I became a chemical engineer and I worked in industry. But it's quite fun working in homes in Australia because we've got everything. I mean, we don't have that challenging of a climate, but we got equipment coming from every part of the world and ideas coming from every part of the world. And, you know, I'm sure that I've still not seen it all. Even after being in a lot of houses, you'll walk into the place and you're like, where'd you get that from? Okay, well, this is the newest thing from Italy. Okay, so yeah, Australia tends to bring those ideas in.
Great. Gillian King says, I'm particularly looking for advice on a ducted reverse cycle air conditioner for an extreme continental climate in Canberra, southeast New South Wales high country. I'm in a 2-story house with R7 loose fill insulation in the ceiling and don't have sufficient wall space for wall mounted systems.
Yeah, so wall space. So yeah, so I don't know if she's talking about, you know, the unit's mounted up on the wall, or she doesn't have space down below either. So she should consider both those options. Maybe she's only thought about the one and didn't realize you can get the air cons that could be mounted down on the floor. So that's one possibility. But also you do have the cassette type and the bulkhead type. So I would say get some experts in. Now, if you're a bit remote, it can be hard finding people that knowledgeable, I suppose. But if you can't get enough knowledgeable people in, what I say generally to people who are looking at buying an air conditioner is I say go to a shop like Dakin, but there's others, of course, and get the hard copy brochures of what they have to sell. I mean, I'm kind of a hard copy person myself, because you can get on the internet and you can miss stuff. You know, you think you've seen it all, but it's hiding somewhere else, either because you missed it or because they didn't design their website that well. So don't be afraid to get the hard copy stuff and go through every page and look at everything that they sell and say, oh, what's that? Oh, maybe that'll work in my house. But anyway, back to Julian's question, which I'm trying to find here. Well, you know, even Canberra, high country area, it's not that extreme on the world scale. And like I said, these air cons are designed to operate down to minus 20 degrees. So you'll find something, I think.
Okay. And from David, what are the pros and cons of ceiling cassettes versus bulkhead versus wall-mounted multi-head heat pump systems?
Yeah, so the wall-mounted are the most common, and so I understand they're cheaper to buy than the others. So I've heard some people come back and say the cassettes and bulkheads were a bit pricey, and also you have to have a place. You have to have bulkheads for your bulkheads, I guess, and the ceiling as well. You'd have to make sure you had a place that you could install that. Like if you have a flat roof or something, you might not be able to do the cassette thing, although they are quite creative and flexible, these aircon installers, with what they can do. So the most likely thing that people are normally going to do will be the wall-mounted type, and as I said, you can get those with a multi-head. Now, let me just see. What was that question again? Or is it gone?
I think it's gone now. Yeah. So
okay. Not sure I answered it. Apologies.
We'll go on to the next one anyway. I think there's lots to go. So Victor asks, how effective and energy efficient are portable reverse cycle air conditioners? And can you recommend a site or sites with good brand comparison information?
Well, a place to start is the Facebook group, My Efficient Electric Home. We've talked about portables, and I guess something that people need to realize about the Facebook group, maybe you're used to them, maybe you're not, but it's actually a searchable database. You know, Renew as well, become a Renew member and you'll have access to everything, I guess, that Renew's ever written online. So that's another excellent database. But the Facebook group, any Facebook group, it's got a little search function over there, which may be easier to see from working off a computer than off a phone. But you go over to the search box there and type in portable, and you'll start to see some discussions come up. And so portable reverse cycle air cons can be really bad, and others aren't as bad. And I think that's if they are a double pipe or a single pipe. So thinking of a summer operation in particular, I've seen these portables in operation. Like a friend of mine he was having a dinner party and his main air con broke down, so he went out and got a portable. And it worked fine for cooling a small space. But since it's a heat pump, it has to pump that heat somewhere. And so it had a single pipe going out the window. So all the hot air was going out the window and cold air was coming out of the device and making us all very happy. So that was nice. But you got to think this through. You got to think, hang on, there's a whole pile of air going out the window. We can still breathe. It's not like it sucked all the oxygen out of the house. So that air had to be made up and it had to come from somewhere. And it was really hot. So it was like a, nearly 40-degree evening or something. So basically through the whole rest of the house, air was being sucked back into the house so that portable air conditioner could move air outside of the house. So it's okay for cooling the spot you're in, but it's no way isn't it an efficient thing, because those other rooms are starting to get really hot with the air being sucked through every crack around the windows and other flaws in a house. And then eventually that air is going to reach you as well. That hot air front will hit you. And so then you kind of shot yourself in the foot. Now there are portable air cons that have more of a double pipe. And so what they can do is bring air in from outside separately, transfer the heat from your living space into that air, and then chuck that air out the window. So the double pipe type can be better, but you never find that the star ratings or COPs of these things are that great.
Yeah, very good answer. Gillian asks, do all heat pumps systems in Australia come with a HEPA filter? We learned how important this was during the fires over summer.
Yes, and and then not sure if Renew might have done an article on this, or they're working on one, but yeah, we certainly all learned a lot about air quality during the bushfires. And one thing we learned, and these questions keep disappearing, Robin, I don't know if we can keep them there a while longer.
Over to you, Doug.
So you'll have to, don't make them disappear quite so fast.
Yeah,
one thing we learned over the bushfire was that it's important for your house to be tight and not to have opportunities for air to leak into it. Say it's a windy day, and if your house wasn't very tight, well, then suddenly your house was full of this bushfire smoke. And particularly people with with the evaporative cooling, which is a once-through system. It sucks air from outside, cools it with the water pads, and comes into your house and then out your windows. Well, they couldn't use those things during the bushfire season. So that's another reason we see people going now to the reverse cycle air conditioners rather than the evaporative type. So we learned a lot about that over the bushfire season. And also another Facebook group sprang up. So that's called My Air Quality Australia, if you're interested in the air quality issues. And certainly, okay, we're not in bushfire season, but now we're in wood burning season. So certainly it's been in the media and other places, the issues with people burning wood close to their neighbors and polluting them and polluting themselves as well, of course. But again, air quality is an issue there. Now back to the HEPA filters, I would say that there are no air cons in Australia that have HEPA filters. So yeah, this certainly came up during all those bushfire events, and people had to go out and buy proper air purification devices that had the HEPA filters. So some air cons are better than others in treating the air, and some of them get like this blue butterfly from the Asthma Council because it's got some extra kit in there to destroy molds and pollens and stuff like that. But none of them have HEPA filters, and none of them really are going to say they can remove the PM 2.5 sort of particles, which was a major health issue with the bushfires. So now, look, people during the bushfires, people did go out and get some really fancy air purifiers like a Dyson or a Daikin or some other models. And I wouldn't mind having a chance to play with one of those myself just to learn a few things.
Thank you, Tim. That was great. From Bill, which heat pumps can do 0.3 air changes per hour or more with outside air?
Oh, right. Yes, so I think he's talking about the Daikin US7, which can bring fresh air into the house. And that's the only aircon I know of that brings fresh air into the house, although, there's new things every day on the Australian market or on the global market. Now, the reason that Daikin US7 can do that is not because they wanted to bring fresh air into the house. It's because they wanted to do this wintertime humidity thing. So the Daikin US7 is kind of special in that the outside unit has another box on top, which is a desiccant wheel. So everybody knows desiccant sucks moisture out of the air. Well, if you have that in a wheel, the desiccant sucks the moisture out of the wheel spins around, it heats up, the moisture gets cooked off the desiccant, but now you have to bring it into the house, and for that they have this fresh air pipe. So obviously you can use that without using the humidification function, and therefore you get some fresh air coming into the house. I don't have the numbers on my head. We did get some data, and we worked that out as to how much fresh air was bringing in. It was some. It wasn't a huge amount, and it's certainly not a heat recovery ventilation system because it's not taking air out of the house. So it's not an air change. It's an air addition that you can do, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because in a sense you can use that to kind of positively pressure your house if you've got contaminants outside, if it's smoke, or if it's because this air gets filtered as it comes in. But if you're just generally concerned about contaminants outside, or even contaminants in your walls, and see, if your house isn't tight and your house is, there's air leakage going on with your house, some of that air is coming at you through cracks in the walls and through the ceiling and other places, through some fairly nasty places where you can have vermin, feces, and other deposits, and dust, and just mold, etc. And so this stuff comes at you as a house kind of breathes with the changes in the air pressure. And so being able to positively pressure your house may be a good thing in making sure that you know where the air you're breathing is coming from. Another thing you can do is open a window, but there's some times when you can do that and sometimes that you don't want to.
Good. And a long question from Jennifer. I live in an apartment with a large north-facing combined living dining room. I want to replace a 20-year-old non-inverter ARCAC with a new inverter model. My current unit is ceiling mounted, facing the length of the room. However, the new ceiling mounted units are much larger, so my supplier recommends a wall mounted unit placed next to the sliding doors. This will face into the short side of the room, but the supplier says that the air would be angled into the center of the room and would circulate and heat the whole area effectively. I'm not convinced he's right. Grateful for your views on the effectiveness of his recommendation.
I guess, can you talk to another supplier? I mean, it's always good to have a couple different opinions. I bought a few air cons for myself, for my kids, or others, and we always get multiple people in because they always have different things to say. And so it's interesting to look at those and you try to decide which one's closer to being the most useful. Certainly the air conditioners can move air, in different directions. And we do that all the time with ours. We're always having them going all different directions. So there is a lot of flexibility there. You said it's a large room, but we don't have the square meters there, so I don't know what large really means. Is it large or isn't it large? And how big's the unit? And how, what's the thermal envelope of the room? If you've got a good thermal envelope, what you can do often is you just basically have the air con slowly ticking over and give them some time. If you're getting up at 6 a.m, well, maybe start them at 5. And people say, oh, I don't like all this hot air blowing on me. Okay, well then don't do that. Just have a low fan speed, let it run for longer. But it comes back to the key. If you've got a decent thermal envelope for your house, then the heat will just come into the house, the heat or the cooling will come into the house and the place will feel comfortable and you won't even care where the heat is coming from. But that is challenging for people if you're starting with a house that is a poor thermal envelope. There's a lot of rectification required. Not sure that I'll be able to give too much more advice on that one without seeing some more details. And look, I'm not an air conditioning expert. I've learned a lot from a lot of people, and I do see what people are out there doing in their homes, and I hope that's what I reported on tonight. But yeah, get some other air conditioning experts involved.
Very good. Ralph says, I have an air conditioner heat pump and a hot water heat pump, and I'd like to move my hydronic panels, which are currently gas heated, to a heat pump. Seems a bit crazy to have 4 heat pumps, all of which will only actually kick into operation occasionally, daily for an hour or 2 for the hot water, and maybe only 10 or 20 days per year for the aircon. Are there any moves in the industry to combine all these functions into one smart system with heat exchangers to each service all powered by ideally 2 alternating duty heat pumps. We think there should be efficiencies in utilizing waste heat from aircon cooling and use it to heat your hot water, for example, or in benefits in reduced numbers of heat pumps and the capital required.
Yeah, this question comes up a lot, and I had a stock answer, but the other day I think, but I'm not going to be able to remember where it was. A lot of stuff, so much stuff goes back past me on the Facebook group every day, but there was what seemed to be a more serious attempt at this sort of thing. It's tough to make it to justify it on the residential scale. I mean, to a certain extent, you're talking about heat integration, and this is done on the large industrial scale quite easily. You've got cold over there, you've got a need for cold over there, need for heat over there, whatever. You can integrate things, and it's worth spending the money on the extra ducting or pipes or heat exchangers or whatever you need. I mean, at our house, I've got 3 heat pumps outside. So I got reverse cycle air cons at either end of the house, and then I got the hot water system, the Sandon in the middle. And there will be times where it almost happened today. There was cold air blowing out of the Sandon, of course, because it was sucking the heat out of there to heat the water. And I'm thinking, well, it's a good thing that the Dakin's not running over here, because it would be getting all this cold air from the Sandon. So I might as well wait till the Sandon's done before I turn the Dakin on. But in the summer, it's the opposite, of course, isn't it? Because you'd like to easily transfer the heat out of the house with the Dakin. And if the Sandon's there blowing a lot of cold air around in the narrow space that you have, at the side of the house next to the neighbor's fence, then, you get a bit of that heat integration happening for free. But there's no way, you could, really, I'm spending $200 a year to heat and cool the house. I'm spending, a very tiny amount on hot water. I can't justify, the best thing the main thing I want to do is put insulation under the floor of the house, because that would make it feel more comfortable, but I certainly can't justify it from an economic point of view. So look, there are some people, I mean, you might as well talk to like Steve Weltron. They've got a beautiful new showroom in Port Melbourne. And of course that comes from Europe, and they talk a lot about integration. So you could start there. And if I could remember who the other crowd was, probably another European crowd where they're thinking about these things. But sometimes on the residential scale, I know people that have six individual air cons and another heat pump for the hot water. So that's 7. And, it's the most economic thing to do with what's on the market.
Okay, great answer. From Sarah, I'd love to hear about the feasibility of using existing heating ducts from an existing gas heating to get heat pump heating and cooling to each room in an existing weatherboard with an extension to be added to the rear.
Right. And so one of the problems you run into, see, you're starting with heating and you want to do heating and cooling. And for cooling, you need bigger ducts, is what the aircon specialists will tell you. So they'll come in and say, and also, let's see, is this starting with gas? Yeah, gas. And the other thing is, for heating, the air that's involved with gas heating is really hot. So again, gas heating only needs smaller ducts. So if you want to come along and say, I want to use these ducts, you'll find people saying that they won't want to guarantee it. Maybe you'll still get somebody to do it. And, it may not work that well, or maybe it'll be fine. Again, that comes down to the thermal envelope of your house and how you're going to manage things and how liable you are to complain about these things, or your partner, more importantly. These sorts of things have been tried. And in fact, Renew's own Katie Daly, in a rental, she succeeded in having reverse cycle aircon to replace her ducted gas heating that came up through the floor. Now, whether she went with actually bigger ducts or not, I can't recall the details there. I think she's documented them on the Facebook group. But it's worth having to talk to people. But these will be some of the issues that you'll run into. Then you got to ask yourself, well, what's the value of hanging onto those ducts anyway? I mean, how much money have you really saved by trying to do that? So new ducts is what I'm saying, that the people that supply this stuff will be happy to guarantee their performance.
You might be better off just doing heat pumps straight into each room.
Well, yeah, that's the other option you need to look at. Yeah. So, our ducted gas heating's gone, but we still have, the registers in every room. So I've sealed them up and insulated underneath so that there's no air leakage, and they're insulated. That's the only part of the floor that is insulated. But those, those fancy grills are still there, and they probably will be, because it's too, until someday maybe you're going to replace carpet or something, then you could think about fixing it up.
From Thamama, I wonder how we might mitigate the urban heat island effect that is exacerbated by waste heat from air conditioners. I grew up in the tropics and the AC is absolutely crucial, but it seems we are trapped in a vicious cycle of cooling our buildings and homes, but making the ambient temperature outside.
Well, sure. And that comes back to the thermal envelope again. I mean, ideally, we should try to set up our homes so that we minimize the use of air conditioning winter or summer. So the urban heat island, well, it's mostly seen as a problem in the summertime. And yeah, your air conditioners are blasting all that, pumping all that heat out of buildings outside. So the key is to do what you can with the thermal envelope so that the house doesn't heat up. And the main thing there is not letting sun hit the glass. So I'll walk into a lot of homes and, it's going to be 35 degrees outside and the windows are completely unshaded. It's a lack of eaves, lack of shading plants. And so the house is just going to heat up. And so then they're going to turn the air conditioner on. So yeah, you really need to think about how you can shade things. And I know that Renew publishes a lot of buyer's guides in the magazines, and there was one on shading and exterior window treatments for the summertime. So you could have a look at that as to the best ways to try to shade your house for summer, and that can certainly reduce the use of the air conditioner, as can, insulation and draft proofing and all those other good things.
Yep. And from Jan, how does the efficiency of heating by burning domestic gas compare with using a heat pump if the electricity is generated by gas? Comparisons should include the inefficiency of gas and electricity transmission from source.
Getting late tonight. Efficiency. Right. Yeah, I guess that if you saw that Sankey diagram, you saw just how tiny is the amount of electricity that you actually need to use to run a heat pump compared to how much gas you're burning. So Renew's done the calculation a couple times. They published the first one, and then I believe they've updated the calculation, but I don't know that that's been published yet. But if I recall what they found that, just making a whole bunch of assumptions, and every home's going to be different, but if you make average assumptions about the efficiency of a gas heater and the efficiency of an aircon, et cetera, I think they found in just about every case that the emissions were less. Are we talking emissions here?
Yeah.
The efficiency of heating. Well, if we're talking about emissions, the emissions were less in every case with the reverse cycle air conditioner. And as I said, that'll only just improve as our electricity grid gets greener and greener. But I published an article in Renew magazine based on the work we did out of the University of Melbourne, and the problem with the gas industry, the gas industry reports some emissions, but a lot of them are just made up. And in some cases, the factor they use for some of their emissions and some of their leak points is 0. So the emissions from gas are really understated. So when you're doing an analysis like that, you'd have to look at a range of, okay, here's what the industry's saying, but maybe this is what's actually happening. And there was data coming from the US about methane emissions from the gas industry until Trump came along and shut a lot of that down. But now we're getting the satellites, and there's satellites flying around the world looking at methane. And every time they look at the oil and gas operations in the United States, they double the estimate of what they thought the methane emissions were.
And I think they're generally finding that it's even worse than coal.
Oh yeah. No, that's easily done. Look. That comparison is usually done when you're to generate electricity. And since the molecule of methane has some hydrogen in that, when you burn that turns to water, not to carbon dioxide. So that can give it a leg up versus coal as a fuel when you're making electricity. But all you got to do is release about 3% of the methane, and it's worse than coal because methane is such a powerful greenhouse gas. Look, the planet's cooking right now. We really shouldn't be chasing more fossil fuels and doing such a horrible job in managing them.
You're right to go for a few more minutes?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, from Bo, I hope this question makes sense. Typically, how much volume of air turnover does a heat pump require for a 3-bedroom house? Roughly 200 square meters? Does it always have to be installed outside in accordance with any plumbing regulations, or could it be practical to install a heat pump with an enclosed glasshouse greenhouse space in winter and cooler months, which partially pre-warm the air, reducing the temperature differential for heating?
Yeah, these longer questions are troubling me to give a sensible answer. But one thing, so I guess you're asking about the outside unit, and the purpose of the outside unit, of course, in heating mode is to suck heat out of the air. And so the outside unit needs to be able to access heat in the air. So it needs to access air, and the air needs to have some heat in it. But what you do find, interestingly, like in the US and other places where they have issues with freezing conditions for water equipment, is they don't put any bit of their hot water systems outdoors because they'd freeze. So they will actually put heat pump hot water systems in garages and garages, I guess, mostly, or basements, and in basements for houses that have basements. And so basically the heat pump, for an hour or two when it's running, will suck all the heat out of the garage or out of the basement, out of that air, but it heats the water in that way. So the same sort of thing, could you do that for like trying to heat a house with a heat pump? Probably not, because the heating loads are going to be higher, and our hot water heat pump only runs for a couple hours a day, whereas in the dead of winter, we'll get a lot more use out of our space heating heat pumps. And so if you stuck them in a very enclosed area where it couldn't get fresh air with the more heat in the air coming in, then it's just going to get colder and colder and colder and colder. And if it's in a greenhouse, you'll probably freeze everything that's in there. And so also you do need to be careful, as I was saying, with the location of your reverse cycle air conditioners outside from this frosting or icing point of view. If on the coldest day you're going to develop some sort of weird microclimate where you've got a lot of humidity and cold temperatures, then you're at a higher risk for the frosting. And we had a number of members, like from Ballarat and some of the colder regions at the Facebook group, right in the dead of winter last year, said, gee, my air conditioner iced up, et cetera, et cetera. And you look at the different ways that some of them are installed, just outside the house or under a deck or over there underneath part of the house, et cetera, and you're trying to figure out which is better or worse from an icing point of view. And I certainly don't have my head around the science that's needed there. Again, ask a local person who does well in this business, and they should have already thought of all these things.
Well, I hope that answers your question. I think probably your greenhouse glass house isn't big enough to be significant as a general rule to help. Next question from Mark. If you're in cool zone 6, is there an optimum size for your heat pump if it's exposed north, or does it matter?
Yeah, see, I don't think it matters, except from the point of view of that icing issue. So people say, should I put since I'm going to use my heat pump mostly in the summer, should I hide it on the south side of the house? Or since I'm going to use it mostly in the winter, should it be in a sunny spot? I think all that's pretty minor. Well, two things. It needs to be able to access enough air. So pick a site where it's going to have lots of access to air. And ours are, pretty standard down the side of the house. I call it the utility area. And like I said, the neighbor's fence there. So it's only got, 1.5 meters, but it's enough. There's enough air can get in there. So it needs to be able to get the air. And then also you could think, am I going to have any particular issues on the coldest day of the winter with the icing if I'm developing some sort of freezing microclimate at 6 a.m?
Okay, and Galaxy asks, are there any makes or models you would recommend for off-grid heating cooling, where the aim will be to predominantly run during the day on solar and use thermal mass in the evening?
Yeah, well, probably the most expensive, efficient one you can find. So yeah, I've got friends off-grid, and they'd like to burn less wood, which is the standard way for heating off grid, I suppose. They certainly use their aircon in the summer because they got heaps of solar, but certainly in the depth of winter, they won't have enough solar to run their air conditioner. Maybe coming out of the depths of winter, they could they can use it again, but obviously you're going to want to have the most efficient one because you're going to want to turn to have the highest possible COP, coefficient of performance, because you've got a limited amount of electricity used. You want to get as much heat out of that as possible.
And you gave a list, I think, earlier with Mitsubishi Heavy Industries and a Daikin and a Sanden.
Well,
pretty good.
Well, normally I'd say go to energyrating.gov.au, but that database seems to be a bit messed up at the moment, and maybe it's because they just changed those star ratings, and now they've got region by region sort of star ratings. So it seemed like a lot of data was missing. But anyway, yeah, go understand the 7-star units from Daikin or Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, and maybe Panasonic's got one by now. I'm not sure. That's your top of the line. See if you can afford that. And if you can't, then if you have to, 1 star is going to mean you're going to be using 10 or 15% more electricity. And if you're off grid, you don't really have that luxury in the middle of winter.
And Rachel asks, does the COP reduce with ducted RCAC over a split or multi-split system?
Yeah, the most efficient units are the single units. Those 7 stars I'm talking about, you won't find that in a multi-head. And like I said, with a multi-head, you have other inefficiencies just with the heat losses out the piping, et cetera, and the way the thing's controlled. But your really superstar top of the line COPs are individual units because they put all the bells and whistles into those things. But the multi-heads can still be fine, as I was saying. Richard Keach and many other members on the Facebook group see that they're perfectly fine and efficient. And
from Natalie, how do you retrofit an old-fashioned house with a central hallway and many rooms off it with reverse cycle heating?
Yeah, exactly. And that can be a challenge. One option, because I've seen this, is to have 6 or 7 air conditioners. Or if that seems like overkill and you just really can't stand having that amount of equipment out there, then you go with the multi-headed system to get the individual to get them to reduce the number of outside units that you have. And then inside, you'll have to see what sort of inside unit you want in those rooms. Of all the different types that we described. But what you might find is that, again, it comes down to your thermal envelope of the house. You want to spend money improving that. And then you might find that you don't necessarily need a lot of heat in a bedroom. And you might need a little, and if, like I'm in a little office here tonight, and over there, there's no reverse cycle air conditioning coming up here, except if I were to open the door, and that would work over a period of time. But if I want a quick heat up under the desk, I've got a resistive electric heater. So, okay, it's only a COP of 1. If I tried to run it 24/7 all winter long, it would be a huge electricity bill. But if I want to turn it on for 10 minutes to heat this tiny room, take the chill off, then that's not going to be much. So one thing that I find with homes that I visit and they want to start making the change is, in some cases, if you can buy 1 air conditioner and in a key room and try it and just understand how the whole house is going to work, and then maybe later make other changes. You don't necessarily have to make all the changes at once. You don't necessarily save a lot of money by doing it that way. So our case, an old weatherboard, we put air cons down to either end. To get across the central hallway. So the 1 air con's in the bedroom up the front, to get across the central hallway, and then to heat the major living area across there, it can happen. You just have to give it time. And this is where, if you have the patience, you can experiment with those things over time. We put air cons in either end of the house, but like I said, I had the installer come around for quotes, and he wanted to give me 4 air conditioners. And I said, no, look, I think 2 will be enough for now. And we're still there 5 years later. I could get another one for that other side of the hallway, but haven't had to do it yet. So, yeah.
Sounds good idea.
Things to experiment with.
And Rosemary says, I live in Rosedale, Victoria for 6 years with airflow across my house. I ended up taking the reverse cycle air conditioner out. In fact, I sold it. My house was cool in summer and warm in winter with Nobo electricity heaters, as my solar panels were in credit to $1,000 per year. Do you know anybody else who can do this?
Look, why don't we have a competition on the Facebook group to see who can do that? And in fact, we have those competitions all the time. So it's great to hear you've got good success there. And you can compare homes at the Facebook group is one place.
Good. And Peter from Canberra. Hi, Tim. What is your opinion of the relative efficiency of still air heat distribution in comparison to moving air distribution using fans, i.e. radiant versus convection?
Yeah, radiant's fantastic if you're right next to it. But even with radiant heating, air starts to move. As soon as you have a temperature differential, air is going to start to move. So you'll have drafts anyway. Even if you've got a window and it's got some sun coming into it, well, then drafts will start. So you can't say the radiant, if you're there for more than a minute, is completely draft free. But yeah, radiant's fantastic, and that's why this this next year is pretty cool. This fellow that had the next year on Monday, so he had it working in both modes really. So there was air blowing, but also he had the radiant thing on. And sure, I came around the corner and into the room, and bang, you can feel the radiant straight away, which is really cool. But the other way to approach it is to get the thermal envelope of your house quite good. And then in the background, you just have heat coming into the house, and it doesn't matter how it's coming into the house. You got enough heat coming in to balance your heat losses, which are small because you got a good thermal envelope. And so you're happy and comfortable in the rooms at a good temperature. And there'll still be air mixing around because you'll always have air currents. I think there was something else I wanted to say. Right, but I can't think of it right now. Sorry.
That's a pretty good answer anyway. And SM McCulloch, with reverse cycle air conditioning, does it impact on the efficiency whether the air conditioner is split or ducted? So,
yeah, sure. And so you'll lose heat out the ducts. So get good ducts that, ideally the ducts would be inside the thermal envelope in a house, but very few houses in Australia are designed that way. But if you've got a new build bespoke house, you could do that. But if the ducts are outside, the thermal envelope will then get good ducts. So there's different R values, different levels of insulation you can get. So get thick ones and make sure installed properly. And it's good if you can inspect them from time to time to make sure they haven't come apart for one reason or another. So those are some of the inefficiencies around ducted. But you will just find that the equipment that you get with a ducted system will not have the high COP of some of the other individual units. So again, there was that one drawing I had, if you were on board when we went through that one, where the fellow had system 1 and system 2, and it was part individual unit, or a multi-split with individual heads, and then part ducted. So there's a bit of a mix and match you can do as well. So you might find that, like for a large part of your house, if you got a big open plan area, you can just do that with one individual unit, and then you can think about the other rooms, how you're going to do those. But if you minimizing the ducting, this is good from an efficiency point of view. But sometimes people go ducted.
And I've seen some pictures on the website with ducts split apart very regularly.
Yeah, everything. And, every duct that's coming down through your ceiling, well, that's a place where you don't have insulation, right? And you'll have, air movement up and into those ducts when the system's not turned on. So, there's a lot of losses there. And so poking holes in a ceiling or under a floor is generally not a good idea. So avoid it if you can.
We might just have a couple more. Martin says, I'm building an airtight house in Sydney. I propose to use a reverse cycle split system air conditioning system. Do I need a whole house ventilation system?
Well, there's airtight and there's airtight. So a whole house ventilation system, it's a new build. Yeah, look, my guru on this sort of thing is Jenny Edwards at Lighthouse Architecture and Science. And so she's published some articles with Renew and some articles with her with her own business. And if you could get her in on your project, well, she'd do a good job. Yeah, so she built a new house in Canberra. And that whole house in Canberra, which has got a pretty challenging climate, right? Cold in winter, hot in summer. She heats and cools the whole place with just one Daikin US7 in the middle of the house. But she does have heat recovery ventilation. So these small things that are, there's matched pairs and they talk to each other or they're on a timer or whatever. So like one is letting air in at one part of the house and another is letting air out of the house, and then they reverse and they do it over again. And plus they have, you know, ceramic or something in there, so they're trying to recover the heat or cold depending on the season, and it's not just a dead loss. So I forget if she has 2 of those 3 pairs around the house. I think she's probably written articles about it, and gee, it seems to work really well. So yeah, it could be important to focus on if it's a, you know, quite a tight modern house. And you know, we're not necessarily talking about passive house here with their 0.6 air changes an hour or something. Jenny's house might be 4 air changes an hour or something. But even there, that ventilation system can make sense. And if the thermal envelope's great, you might find you need less in the way of reverse cycle capacity than what you thought you did, so long as you can keep the, you know, the heat off the glass in the summertime.
Yep. And from Ryan, when building a home, is it possible, or are there companies where someone can come and check how well the thermal envelope is sealed?
Yeah, great. An easy question for once. When building a home? Yeah, sure. The answer is yes. The answer is yes. So, and look, there's changes to the construction code, which are becoming, you know, which are going to hold the builders to account a bit more than they used to do. But so a couple things. Check the insulation before it gets hidden behind plaster and make sure it's perfect, because it's really hard to fix that afterwards, isn't it? And then the final check for the air tightness is the blower door test. So maybe not everybody knows what a blower door test is, but Google, you know, a vendor in your local area that can do a blower door test. They put a blower on your front door, they mask off the rest of the door. And then with the outdoor windows and doors closed, they try to suck all the air out of the house. And you can walk around with a smoke machine and you can see wherever there's leaks happening, and there always are leaks happening. And then with some sophisticated pressure measurement tools, they can give you a calculation as to how many air changes per hour are going on. And so does it meet the standard you were looking for or didn't it? So I don't know if it's in your contract as to how many. Sounds like it might not be. You could have a contract where you stipulated that you were going to have a blower door test and the house had to meet a certain standard of air changes per hour. But even if that's not in your contract, you can try and keep an eye on people as they're building things to make sure that it's going to be airtight. But ultimately, you can do this blower door test, and often air leaks are not as bad as insulation. They can be fixed. You know, if you haven't put insulation in the walls, okay, now what are you going to do once you put the plaster up? But if you just got cracks and leaks and things around the house, then it is possibly easier to plug those things up once you find them. But you know, you gotta look in all different directions. You gotta turn your head around and look at things in a way that people don't normally look at things. Like take architraves around windows and doors. You know, you'll find that where anybody can see it down the side, it'll be sealed. But if you're, you know, up on top where no one's going to look, they don't seal that. So you got to go look at all the places that people don't normally look. For example, we just had a laundry renovated, and I told the guy I wanted it to be nice and tight. And, you know, I saw that up the top there, they had the cornices partly done, but then the cabinets were going to come in, and there was a big gap straight up into the roof space, and it's fine. I'm thinking, well, something's going to happen here. Well, the cabinet comes, and then the cornice gets finished around the cabinet, but the cabinet didn't go all the way to the back of the wall, did it? I mean, they leave themselves some leeway so that it'll fit in an old crooked house. And so if you were to look up the back of the cabinet, if you could, you'd see straight up to the roof space. So here, you know, the whole laundry room was going to have a gap this big, the whole size of that, you know, the width of the washing machine, and the gap this big up behind the one cabinet. So before the washing and the stacked washer and dryer went in, you know, I'm up there with medium density foam filling up that big gap. It would have been better to have done something else, but still I think I got it fairly tight. But and he basically had to go around like this and look up and think, oh yeah, there's a heck of a big gap up there. So that's what happens.
Well, yeah, maybe it is 9 o'clock, so maybe just two more. Tim says, what size system, 2 kilowatt, etc., do you have to heat your home? You said you had 2 of them.
Yeah, and that's all documented in Renew Magazine 133. Well, it's available without the paywall. Comfortably ahead, a tale of 2 heaters. And so I've got all the kilowatts there and the square meters of the house. And then on the Facebook group, I've even uploaded the floor plan of the house so you can see exactly how it all fits together. Again, one of those drawings, you know, a floor plan that actually shows where the darn heating system's going to be.
And from Chris Osborne, who'll be the lucky last and has 2 questions. We replaced our gas hot water service with a Sundance Eco Plus 315 heat pump when it expired. Would it be worthwhile or even possible to use this heat pump to run hydronic heating? We have a 6.5 kilowatt solar system that runs during sunlight hours.
Right, so he hasn't told me how he's heating his house. But no, Sandon doesn't do hydronic. They won't offer a warranty for that in this country. But there are other heat pump hydronic vendors that will sell you something. You know, don't know where you live, how you cool your house in summer, but chances are you're going to have a reverse cycle air conditioner, so try that for heating.
Very good. Well, it's after 9 o'clock, so thank you. That's been 2 hours of very solid work. I'd just like to thank Tim. That was another amazing session. So much information. Been a privilege to listen and to learn again so much. Thank you enormously. I find Zoom the most disappointing thing here. As you said at the beginning, we need a noise machine, and Doug needs to invent that in the next 2 weeks, so we can give 240 odd people clapping a great presentation. Thank you again, Tim. Thank you all for being here.